I have always loved space. As a kid, I dreamed about what it would be like to explore the solar system or maybe even live on Mars someday. But for me, it's hard to separate my love for space from my fear of it. So when I heard about Rin Chupeko's novel, The Galaxy, the Stars, the Earth, and Everything in Between, which is about a girl named Rin who wakes up after a crash landing to find herself alone on a spaceship full of secrets, I knew I needed to read it. And now I am here to talk to you guys about why I think it deserves all the praise it has been getting. The story follows Rin, a 9-year-old girl who lives aboard the spaceship Stella Mora along with her mum, scientists, engineers, and other children. Their mission to leave their dying planet in search of a new home among the stars. When Rin wakes up from a cryogenic sleep, though, she finds that everyone has mysteriously disappeared and she is alone. Not only that, but it seems like the ship may be damaged as well, having lost power and begun to leak atmosphere. And so, with nothing but a battered teddy bear and the ship's onboard AI named Cinnamon, Rin must solve cryptic clues left by her mother in order to save herself and perhaps the future of humanity. What I really appreciate about this book is how Rin is such a relatable character despite her unique situation. The things that she cares about are very much the same as any other neat-enrolled, like playing with her friends and spending time with her family and pets. And yet the story also makes it clear that Rin is a very intelligent young woman who is more than capable of taking care of herself. When faced with dangerous situations, she doesn't just cower and wait for someone to help her. Instead, she uses her wits and courage to try to make the best of the situation. The writing itself is absolutely breathtaking. From the opening scene, the reader is thrown into action alongside Rin, as she awakens with no memory of the past or knowledge of how she ended up where she is. We learn right alongside her as she explores the ship and discovers clues about what happened to her mother and the other passengers, and as the story unfolds, we get deeper and deeper glimpses into the characters' lives and the secrets they've been hiding. One of the most striking aspects of the prose is the way the author uses language to create vivid imagery in the reader's mind. There is a scene in particular that really sticks out to me where Rin is floating through a maintenance shaft, and the author writes she rubbed the faceplate of her little maintenance mask with the back of her hand. Not a real suit, not sealed, a thing to keep your head scrubbed if the air got bad, not if the outside came rushing in. She had a tiny flashlight clipped to its side. She flicked it on and the shaft turned to a column of dust and floating lint. She blinked until the shapes stopped being shapes. Through this, we really get a sense of the claustrophobic and terrifying situation that Rin is in, as well as her resourcefulness and resilience. As a science fiction story, The Galaxy, the Stars, the Earth, and Everything in Between definitely hits the mark for me. It's exciting, suspenseful, and raises some really interesting questions about the nature of humanity and what it means to be alive. The plot moves quickly and keeps the reader guessing until the very end. And I found myself completely engrossed in the mystery surrounding Rin's mother and the fate of the other passengers. The author also does a great job of building suspense and keeping the reader on the edge of their seat. There's a constant sense of danger and uncertainty that permeates the story, and I found myself holding my breath at several points as I read. However, what I think sets this story apart is the author's exploration of deeper themes like identity, loss, and the power of family. Despite the futuristic setting and advanced technology, this is ultimately a very human story about a girl's journey to discover who she is and where she belongs. One of the most touching aspects of the story is Rin's relationship with her mother. We never actually meet her, but through flashbacks and memories, we get a sense of the kind of person she was and the impact she had on her daughter's life. There's a real sense of longing and love between them, and it's clear that Rin is desperate to find out what happened to her. The author also does a great job of developing the supporting characters, even though many of them are only present in flashbacks. Each character is fully realized and brings something unique to the story. For example, there's Sam, a fellow passenger who becomes a close friend to Rin and her mother. We don't know much about him, but he clearly has a big heart and is willing to put himself in danger to help others. And then there's Tuck, Rin's robotic pet, who is more than just a cute sidekick. He's a symbol of the hope and wonder that still exists in Rin's life, even in the darkest of times. Another aspect of the book that I really appreciated was the author's use of symbolism. Throughout the story, objects and images are used to represent larger themes and ideas. For example, the title of the book, The Galaxy, the Stars, the Earth, and Everything in Between, refers not only to the physical space that Rin is traveling through, but also the emotional and psychological journey that she goes through as well. Similarly, the stars that guide Rin on her journey can be seen as a metaphor for hope and the possibility of new beginnings. Now, I do want to say that this book isn't perfect. Some parts of it were a little scary for me to read, like when Rin is forced to explore the ship alone and faces dangerous situations without any adult supervision. And there were a few moments where I felt like the plot was a little too convenient. However, these are just minor quibbles and didn't take away from my overall enjoyment of the story. Overall, the galaxy, the stars, the Earth, and everything in between is a thrilling adventure that will stay with me for a long time. It's a must-read for anyone who loves science fiction or just a good story, and I highly recommend it for readers of all ages. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Here's a pop quiz. What do all these images have in common? Ready? Okay, are you sure? Keep thinking. Still nothing. Alright, I'll tell you. They all come from a story called The Curve from the new book in my series, a Marwan collection, and I'm gonna read you the next part right now. It's one thing to explore a single story in depth, like I did in the last video, but a collection of interconnected stories connected by characters and themes, and that little Easter egg you just found, well, that's something special. This is the second book I've done in collaboration with a publishing company, and I think it's special for a few reasons. First, there are 5 stories in here by 5 different authors. Second, all of them take place in a fictional universe that I built in collaboration with a team of incredible designers, artists, and writers. And third, you get to see everything I learned in between writing the first book in the series and the second book in the series. So this is my book, but it's not exactly mine. See, every story in this book is grounded in real science, but the way those stories unfold and the creativity required to form them into narratives, that's the author's work. Each story is unique. There's adventure, there's mystery, there's horror, there's a serial killer. Well, sort of. These stories span the entire age range of middle-grade readers. So there really is something for everyone. Oh, and if you're a fan of aliens and spaceships and mysteries, then this book is especially for you. I mean, you know me. I love aliens and spaceships and mysteries. That's why this story in particular is so much fun to write. We get to explore a galaxy full of possibilities. We get to use science to create immersive worlds. We get to have adventures with unforgettable characters, and it's all based on real scientific principles. I think middle-grade readers are an especially exciting audience. Their imaginations are boundless. They're natural scientists, natural explorers. You know, kids learn best by doing, by exploring, by asking questions, by testing their ideas against the world. And this is the perfect opportunity to introduce young minds to STEM subjects. I mean, imagine getting excited about science or coding or engineering or math because you're rereading a story and having so much fun. If you're interested in fostering a love of learning in your kids, then I can't recommend this book enough. The stories in here will inspire curiosity. They'll spark an interest in science, and they'll encourage kids to embrace challenges and never stop exploring. And now, without further ado, let's jump back into the story. The other voice, the thin teacher voice, said, "Don't count the stars. It doesn't like it when you count its eyes." "What is it?" Rin asked, and the hum rippled like something had brushed against the outside of the hull. "Something with so many edges it couldn't remember if it was a hand." "Not a thing," the voice said. "A curve." "The curve," Rin repeated. "Where does it want to go?" she asked. The answer came from somewhere behind her. "Everywhere," it said, and the echo of the word "everywhere" was like a shape that knocked against her skull. Tuck spun in a circle, then stopped and pointed its glove at the floor. "Open," it said. Rin knelt down and pried off a panel, revealing a black cable underneath. She pulled it out and let it snake over the deck, past her legs, over her toes. She could feel the darkness seeping up it, tickling her skin. She rolled it under her boot and continued walking. She didn't need to listen to the hum anymore. She could feel it vibrating the plates under her feet, rising and falling with her steps. A song with no melody, a story with no beginning. It was everywhere. It was nowhere. Tuck looked at the backs of her gloves. How could they make a path through something that wasn't there? A direction out of something that wanted to be everything? "Tuck, I don't know." Tuck pressed a flat palm against the bulkhead, leaving a print in the dust. Then it rattled its bony fingers together. She heard a word, not in her ears, in the bones of her face. Hold on to me," it said. "Hold on to you," she whispered. She reached out and Tuck took her glove in both of its cold ones. She counted 1, 2, 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. She felt the curve pressing against her chest, trying to wriggle loose, trying to trickle away. She anchored. She tightened her grip on Tuck's glove and gave the ship the name she had unknown. She was shouting, "Marwan." The ship shuddered. Something like a star blinked behind her, and she knew it was watching her. She didn't turn around. "Marwan," she said, and the word became a shield. It settled the rocking. It grounded the darkness. She kept counting. She didn't need to run away from the curve. She could be the curve. She could stay in the in-between places. She could live in the almost. She could hold on to tuck. The corridor had been empty when they entered it. Now it teemed with the whispers of unseen things. Rin felt the shift in her shoes, tasted it on her lips. She walked forward. As she left the empty corridor behind, she heard a sound she recognized. Tap, tap, tap. Little footsteps like pebbles skipping across water. She stopped. The pebbles stopped. Was it the curve, or something else? She counted to 8 and waited. When the pebbles began again, she followed the sound, tucked close behind her. Through the dusty air, she saw something small and dark scuttling out from between the bulkheads. She recognized the shape of the backpack, the mop of dark hair peeking out from underneath its cover. "Sam," she said. Sam looked up, startled. His eyes were wide. He wore a pilot's helmet, but it sat crooked on his head. His suit was too big for him. The sleeves ended halfway up his forearms, bunched up and fluttering like a moth pinned beneath glass. "Rin," he said. "Are you scared?" Rin asked. "No," he said. "You, sometimes," she said. Tuck rapped its knuckles against his helmet once. He nodded at it. "New friend," he said. "He's nice," Rin said. "Sam?" she asked. "What do we do?" "Look for others," he said. "Okay," she said. They found 3 people hiding by the cargo elevator. They were huddled together, hugging their knees. When they saw Rin, one of them cried out. "We thought we were alone," one of them whispered. "There's more of us," Rin said. She unclipped her radio and held it out. "Do you have a name for the ship?" she asked. The girl shook her head. "We didn't see a name," she said. "But we know a way," the boy said. "We saw a flash of light," the girl said. "And then we heard a name." "I'll show you," the boy said. He stood up and walked toward the elevator. "Wait," Sam said. "How can you see a flash of light and hear a name?" "We can," the boy said. "Our suits pick up radio waves. We can hear names that way. Sometimes it's random, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes they're looking for us," the girl added. "It happens to me. When I'm quiet, I hear the names. It's a game we used to play, calling out our names." She smiled faintly. "It's the only game we used to play." The girl looked up at Rin. "If you want to find the others, you follow the light. Can you see the light?" Rin closed her eyes and tried to tune into the hum of the ship. She wanted to anchor her name. She wanted to hear it called, but she only heard the buzz of wires, the susurrus of the dust. She opened her eyes and met the girl's gaze. "No," she said. The girl reached out and touched her gloved hand. A touch sent sparks crawling up Rin's arm. "Close your eyes," the girl said, "and reach out." Rin hesitated, then reached for the light. This is the author. Today we're going to look at an excerpt from A Psalm for the Wild built by Becky Chambers. We'll consider how the author writes action and tension. If you haven't read this book yet, this video will contain spoilers, so skip ahead if you want to watch without knowing what happens. The story follows Dex, a young caretaker robot who decides to leave their monastery after an experience that leads them to believe there's more to existence than caring for elders. They take off across the galaxy, eventually crash landing on the planet that the humans settled before Earth was abandoned. There they meet a human named Rin who's been living on the planet alone for most of her life. The two form an unlikely friendship and work together to survive while also learning more about themselves. This excerpt takes place early in the story, right after Rin helps Dex repair their suit so they can return home. In her head, through the helmet, Rin heard beeps in a rhythm that matched her heart. She fastened the bear inside the suit's chest pouch so she could feel it against her. The air hissed out of the chamber, and her throat got tight. She squeezed the handles. The outer door rolled. Black came in like a silence you could drown in. She stepped onto the hull and became a dot moving across a curved line, her tether unspooling behind her like a tale told too fast. This paragraph is mostly comprised of short, punchy sentences. These quick, choppy lines build momentum like Rin's movements. They mirror the motion of the action that they describe. When she steps outside, the sentence lengths increase, becoming longer and more fluid. This mirrors Rin's shift from walking to moving across the curve. The shorter lines contrast with the longer ones to emphasize her speed. She had never thought the ship was big. It was where she slept and read and ran slow races in corridors when grown-ups weren't looking. Outside it was enormous, a metal whale in a dark ocean, and the ocean wasn't water. It was something older. Here the reader learns more about Rin's character through comparison. The ship is a place Rin is familiar with. It has functions and purposes she understands, but when she views the ship from the outside, we learn that she's just as unaware of its true nature as Dex is. Her flashlight flicked on and made a cone that caught motes, and the motes were ice and dust and the breath of her own suit. Beyond that cone, The arcs of stars bent like reeds in windless water. Something moved at the edge of the arcs, like a thought turning its head. This is an example of how Chambers uses sensory details to bring her world to life. Here we see the effects of light, the texture of the space, and even hear the sounds of the environment. All of these details contribute to a sense of realism. Also notice the similes used in this paragraph. The stars are compared to reeds, which brings to mind fragility, and the stars are frozen. And the thing that moves beyond the cone of light is compared to a thought turning its head. Using similes like these draw comparisons between the familiar and the unknown, helping readers better understand what might otherwise seem incomprehensible. The manual clamp was a lever that should have turned with a smooth push. It resisted. It hummed under her glove with a tone that made her teeth feel soft. The hum wasn't a sound in air at all. It came up through the metal and into her bones. In this section, we begin to see the tension of the scene building. Until now, the writing has been fast-paced, but the tone has been light. However, this paragraph introduces resistance. The clamp won't turn, and we know from the previous paragraph that if Rin can't fix the clamp, she won't be able to signal for help. This realization raises the stakes. The physical struggle Rin experiences with the clamp is mirrored by the struggle she experiences emotionally as she realizes the severity of her situation. The curve had found the clamp and made it part of its song. It held. The lever might as well have been welded. Rin pulled until her shoulders shook, until little sparks danced at the edges of her sight. As soon as the curve becomes aware of Rin, the tone of the writing changes. It begins to sound sentient, taking on a personality. The curve is personified, being described as having intentions and feelings. This adds an element of danger. Up until this point, the curve hasn't seemed threatening. In fact, it appeared almost gentle. However, this new personification makes it clear that the curve means Rin harm. She let go, panting, and in the silence of vacuum, panicked for the 100th time because the panic had nowhere to go. Her breath fogged and then cleared, fogged and then cleared. Tuck buzzed in her ear. It projected a little diagram on her visor, a line and a loop and a node. Resonance. The captain's scarf showed up in Rin's mind. The voice talking about guitars with strings and bridges, and how notes were not inside a guitar until something made them. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." After describing the physical struggle, Chambers focuses on Rin's emotional struggle as she realizes the full implications of her situation. The writing slows down, mirroring her panic. We see her attempt to cope with the situation through problem solving, first with the clamp and then with the lifeboat. When she remembers the conversation with the captain, it seems like a lifeline. Problem solving often interrupts panic because it redirects our attention to finding a solution. When we focus on what we can change, we stop focusing on things we can't control. Tuck buzzed in her ear. It projected a little diagram on her visor, a line and a loop and a node. Resonance. When Rin hears the beep of the lifeboat, the writing switches from past tense to present tense. This creates a sense of immediacy. The reader experiences the moment alongside Rin. She looked at the tether where it anchored. She thought of swing sets, and the way you could make a swing stop and start with timing and little shifts of weight. In this paragraph, we see the culmination of the scene. After a period of frantic activity, things settle down. The writing slows again, mirroring a shift in pace. The scene wraps up with a sense of calm. She tapped her mag boots from one plate to the next, making the ship ring in small dull notes. The curve thrummed back, not quite matching her. She shifted her stance, tugged the tether so it sang high and then low, found the node where the clamp hummed hardest, then moved off that node and pulled suddenly. The tone toppled. Something like a sigh went through the metal, and the lever moved. It moved an inch. It fought for the inch. This final paragraph showcases the climax of the scene. Once again, the writing becomes faster and more energetic. The paragraphs are longer and more complex, reflecting the increasing intensity. The curve responds to Rin in a meaningful way. It sings back. It engages with her attempts at communication. Through this interaction, we learn that the curve is curious. It wants to know more about Rin and the lifeboat. Rin gritted her teeth. "Green light," she said, and pulled again. A jerk, then held, then breath, counting 8, then again. The lever loosened like a tooth that had taken too long to let go. With a jolt it slid to release, and a line of frost leaped from the edges like it had been holding its breath. The writing maintains a fast pace, driving towards the climax of the scene. The physical action is intense. We see Rin struggling with the clamp, but we also see her resolve. Despite the difficulty, she doesn't give up. She tries again and again, refusing to be defeated, and her efforts pay off. The lever releases and the lifeboat can finally leave. With a cough, the lifeboat crossed the arcs of light like a shadow with no owner. It was quiet in a vacuum, but in the bones of the ship it screamed. The scream came through the soles of her feet, up her shins, and made her belly turn to water. The clamp had been a finger, now the finger was open. Once the scene's conflict is resolved, the writing slows once again. The action is over. The last thing the excerpt gives us is a hint at the danger the curve represents. The lifeboat escaping implies that the curve is dangerous. To be clear, the threat of the curve isn't explicitly stated in this excerpt, but its actions speak louder than words. The curve is sentient, it communicates and interacts with those around it, and it reacted violently to the prospect of the lifeboat leaving. This creates suspense, hinting at future conflict that will likely arise from this encounter. The lifeboat's door was small. The couch inside smelled like old plastic and lemon cleaner. And on that note, this excerpt ends. It resolves the immediate conflict of the scene, but leaves the overall story unresolved. We still don't know what will happen to Rin and Deck or what the curve is, but we're given just enough to make us want to keep reading. I'm going to read this story by Ada Palmer called The Eye of the Stella Mora. This is part of a series called Stories from the Long Way Home. And you know, I feel like we are finally getting to some good ones. Okay. The panel lights were green and cautious. Rin strapped herself in with hands that trembled. Tuck scrabbled into a slot and clicked itself down so hard it squeaked. The bear lay on her chest with its face turned up toward the ceiling. Manual override, Rin said. Launched the boat considered. It was shy about things like this. Its personality by default was to ask for 3 confirmations and then a hug, but now, with the clamps free and the ship's bones singing, it obeyed. It shuddered, drifted, and then kicked with a small engine that sounded like a cough after crying. From the window, Stella Mora looked like a whale drifting by a black beach. Rin put her palm on the glass and this time felt the faintest vibration as the engine grumbled on. The arcs of bent stars curved. The curve turned its hunger toward her tiny boat. Not like a chase, like a thought that resented a question it hadn't known how to answer. On the navigation panel, the star map rippled, not an error, not random. The dots gathered themselves into an eye. Rin's heart stumbled. She grabbed a crayon from the emergency kit crayons for kids who found themselves alone and needed to mark where it hurt and drew a window over the eye, a big square with lines for panes. She stuck the drawing to the panel with tape so that the eye saw a window instead of her. Something in the hum changed. It didn't go. It simply became the sound of an old refrigerator in a kitchen where someone was making tea very far away. Beacon, she told Tuck. Find the nearest real voice, Tuck chirped. It spit out a little arrow. A pulse went into the dark. A quiet hello with Rin's name tucked in its pocket. The boat turned with a sigh, and the curve watched from the corner of her senses. Not gone. Things like it didn't go. They folded into a place just out of reach. As Rin drifted into a thinner dark, she sang to herself to fold up the ragged edges of fear. The song was about a river and a bridge and a fox, a thing her teacher had used to teach them about puzzles, the ones you could hold in your hands and the ones that lived in your head. Her voice was small in the cabin. It sounded like a brave voice. It sounded like somebody's when rescue found her hours or days later. She couldn't tell their voices were too loud. They came in, stunned and careful, like people stepping into a shrine. The ship had left a smear in the sky that made instruments stop for breath. They wrapped Rin in a blanket that smelled of new plastic. They said things like incredible and miracle and don't think about this now. Someone pressed a cup of hot chocolate into her hands and it shook, and when she spilled a little book, the beads of brown hung in the air and then decided to fall to the carpet squares. Gravity here tried, the way it always tried on small ships, to be the whole earth in a small place. What happened to you? A gentle voice asked. Rin knew to anchor. She counted to 8, in and out. She looked past the window where a small arc of bent starlight had followed them like a curl of hair behind the ear of a giant. She touched her collarbone, her cheekbone, her forehead, spelling her name without a sound. Space has forces, she said. Some of them notice. They took her hand. They asked if she wanted to sleep. She nodded and let her eyes close. In the slip between waking and dreams she thought of Garden, 2S green breath, and of the bare S button eye, and of the way a lever gives if you sing to it in the right voice. Beyond the cabin wall, the curve of the sky smoothed itself innocent. Rin let it. She had learned, in the belly of the Stella Mora, to stare only for a second and then look away. So first off, the ending leaves us with a lot of questions, but also it kind of ties everything together in a neat bow, doesn't it? The ending feels earned. Rin makes it through and she is rescued, and the ambiguity of what exactly happened to her and why, that's up to the reader to decide. That works for me. It's a nice feeling at the end of a story when you get to have all those pieces come together and make sense. One of the most fascinating aspects of this story, though, is the relationship between Rin and her ship, which goes beyond the typical bond between a pilot and a spacecraft. Here, the ship is sentient and has a personality, emotions, likes and dislikes. It's almost like a pet. For example, the ship is hesitant to launch because it wants to be careful and it's shy about doing dangerous things. This makes for an interesting dynamic between Rin and the ship, which reminds me a bit of a parent-child relationship. Rin has to convince the ship to take risks, to do things that are uncomfortable or scary, and the ship needs Rin's reassurance and love to be brave. But it's not just a cute relationship. It's also deeply humanizing for Rin. We learn from the story that Rin was abandoned by her parents and she's been fending for herself since she was young. Now, this story is a science fiction space opera, so there's a lot of cool technology and adventure. But at its heart, it's really a story about love and connection. Despite being alone for so long, Rin never gave up hope of finding someone who cares about her. And in the end, she does find that love and connection, not only with the people who rescued her, but also with the ship that she loves like a pet. And speaking of love and connection, this is the perfect time for me to ask you, my dear listener, to show your love and connection to this channel by supporting us on our platform. By becoming a supporter, you'll gain access to exclusive content, including audiobooks like this one, as well as early access to ad-free versions of our regular episodes. You'll also be helping us keep the lights on and the podcast going. So please visit our support page or click the join button in your podcast app. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Rin's journey is fraught with danger and uncertainty, but she never loses hope. Even when she's lost in space and her ship is dying, she still believes that she will be okay. And this positive attitude helps her to overcome the challenges that she faces. She uses her wits and her knowledge of space to try to fix her ship and find a way out of her situation. And eventually her hard work pays off. She's rescued and she's able to return home. As I listened to the story, I kept thinking about how much I loved it. It's such a unique blend of science fiction, fantasy, and adventure. The world building is fantastic. I love the way that the author describes the ship and the space around it, and the characters are so well developed. I really felt like I got to know Rin and her ship on a personal level, and I was rooting for them the entire time. If you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out this story and the rest of the series. It's so good, and I can't wait to see what the author writes next. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to leave us a review. Your feedback is so important and it helps us grow. Also, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, happy reading.